I'm Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. Welcome to our event, Ready for Anything, Paratus. We're going to tell you about the launch of our digital health accelerator, Paratus. But first I'll tell you a little bit about Matter for those of you who aren't intimately familiar with what we do. So our mission is to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare. Functionally, we run an incubator for healthcare startups. We've worked with and supported more than 1,000 companies now from around the world, ranging from pre-seed to seed and Series A and beyond, primarily digital health and medical devices, but a smattering of other technologies as well. And in aggregate, they've now raised more than $5 billion to fuel their growth. We also run 6 or 8 accelerators per year, all in partnership with the elements of the industry. Could be health systems, life sciences companies, payers. Increasingly, we're working with foundations. They are all accelerators on particular topics, usually 3 months, cohorts of 5 to 10 companies, and we really dig in with them to help them help accelerate their trajectory. We also work with large enterprises to help them build their internal innovation capabilities. We have a suite of education and training offerings and services to help them, in certain cases, function a little bit more like entrepreneurs in order to capitalize on new opportunities or address challenges that they are facing. So that's the background on Matter. Like everybody else, a few years ago, we noticed that the country and the world could have been better prepared to navigate a large-scale public health emergency like a pandemic. And so when we found out that BARDA, and you'll learn more about BARDA in a minute, but when we found out they were building a new accelerator network of entrepreneurial hubs focused on supporting companies that will help the U.S. be more resilient and better prepared for a future pandemic or future public health emergency, we were all in. Our hub is called Paratus, which means ready for anything in Latin. We support early stage digital health companies by running accelerators and funding product validation studies to help develop and validate the kinds of medical countermeasures that we need more of in order to better respond to future public health emergencies. So today, we are delighted to kick off this partnership. We will start with an introduction to BARDA, their mission, an overview of the new Accelerator Network. We'll then move into a series of conversations with leaders who bring strong perspectives about public health security. We'll start with Dr. Omar Latif from Rush, continue with Dr. Ngozi Ezike from Sinai Chicago, and who was formerly leading the Illinois Department of Public Health. And then we'll wrap up with Dr. Donna Edelson, who leads a company called Agile MD. So then we'll finish up the program with an overview of Paratus programs that are underway and what's coming soon. And then for those of you who are in person in the room here, we hope you'll stick around for a reception. So with that, I'd like to welcome, we have guests from BARDA. You're going to hear from Asim Subadi, who is the director of the BARDA Drive Catalyst Office. He leads a team focused on advancing health security innovation and technology commercialization through BARDA Ventures, through the BARDA Accelerator Network, and through collaboration that they have with Johnson & Johnson called the Blue Knight. Also, we're going to hear from Manbir Singh, who is the co-program manager of the BARDA Accelerator Network. He has a background in infectious disease research and biotechnology and a background in helping early-stage innovators and entrepreneurs bring their technologies to market. Asim.
Thank you. Okay. I have a mic, so handheld. I can walk around. I can see people here. So I'll just walk around a little bit. Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction, and thank you to the Matter team for the warm welcome here in Chicago. I did my undergrad at Iowa State, so this almost feels like coming home. I haven't been back in a while, but it's good to be back. So we have slides. We figured, we made some pretty slides, so we might as well show it. How many of you here had heard of BARDA before Stephen just said BARDA? And let's see, show of hands. Less than half. So my goal is, by the time you leave, not only you are educated about BARDA, but you'll go out and tell everyone how amazing a federal agency BARDA is. We're not going to get into what's happening in DC right now and all of that. We'll just talk and tell you about all the great things we do, and so our actions will speak for what the kind of things we do. Really excited about the new partnership we have with Matter, and you'll hear more about all the great things we'll do. We're just getting started, and it's a 10-year-long partnership at least, so we are around for a while. So for those of you who did not know BARDA, we are in the Department of Health and Human Services within the US government. And so a lot of you would have heard of NIH and FDA and CDC. Just like those, BARDA sits within an entity called Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, or ASPR. So we are an operating division within HHS. And there are others besides the ones I named as well. And so within ASPR, our role at ASPR is really anything that could lead to a public health emergency. So it could be man-made threats, it could be natural threats, it could be biological threat, it could be chemical, radiological, nuclear threats. How do we ensure that we as a country are prepared for and can respond to those threats? And so our role really is development of technologies. And so this could be therapeutics, vaccines, diagnostics, digital tools, any other technologies that can help us in this mission. And at BARDA, we do that with our partnerships. We do not do it ourselves, because we know there are other better people out there, especially entrepreneurs and innovators who are really developing these technologies. And so we partner with them to get these technologies developed, validated, and into the hands of the patients whenever needed. And so a lot of preparedness focus. So can we ensure that next time there is a pandemic, we have all of these technologies that will help us to respond. And so, as I said, it's about $2 billion a year that is dedicated to R&D funding. It's in the name, advanced research and development. So a vast majority of what we do tends to be in advanced research and development space. And what that then helps us do is gets product all the way through FDA approval into the market. And oftentimes, we also procure the product and put it in a strategic national stockpile and hope that we never have to use it. We're gradually moving away from that model. We want to be more sustainable. So, can we, in fact, develop a lot of these technologies that could be platform technologies that could be tweaked as needed. So we have gotten 95 products through FDA approval, and that list keeps growing. And we can do that because we have this great partnership with other federal government partners as well as our industry partners. And this list will keep growing, and I hope all of the entrepreneurs here, we can have your logos in there as well. So just a little bit about how we are structured. As I said, primarily R&D support with multiple different approaches. We're subdivided into 5 different divisions that, again, are very much out there trying to support innovation across the spectrum from really early all the way to advanced R&D. We have several support divisions that will help us ensure that the companies we're working with have access to expertise, where we have people from FDA that have come to BARDA. We have people from industry that really provides those expertise that are needed for the companies. And then we have an amazing partnering team that really allows us to do a lot of innovative partnership like the one we have with Matter now through the BARDA Accelerator Network. And so if you look here, as I said, like primarily advanced R&D, but we understand that you cannot build a pipeline of advanced R&D without building that early stage ecosystem and early stage program. So We go all the way from early sort of R&D, discovery stage, all the way through FDA approval and procurement. And we have design programs that are really bespoke and helping entrepreneurs and innovators at the stage they are in. And so I'll talk about sort of these different models of partnering. As I said, I used to be at NIH before I moved over to BARDA, and you look at NIH and it's primarily grants and contracts, and that's the way they fund and support. One of the great thing about BARDA is we, one, have a lot of flexibility in terms of the way we can do partnership, right? We leverage something called Object Transaction Authority. Let's just do this unique partnership model that you typically don't hear in the government. So you'll hear a lot more about one of the star program, BARDA Accelerator Network, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the other sort of approaches with partner. At that really early stage incubation stage, we have a partnership with Johnson & Johnson through their J Labs model, which is like they have this physical lab space where a company can get access to lab space and office space. So it's called Blue Knight. A company can come in, we'll subsidize their incubator cost. They'll get a mentor from J&J, they'll get a mentor from BARDA. We also do non-dilutive funding to these companies. And the goal there is to incubate and accelerate these early stage ideas and move them forward and really connect them with the industry partner from that really early onset. And so it's been a great partnership. We have close to 50 companies that are in the portfolio there. Several of them are in clinical stage now and really helping take their technology forward. And just really thinking about the sustainability approach. So most of these companies are in fact developing technologies that have multiple use cases, because we don't want to be in a situation where we have a company that is totally dependent on BARDA or federal government for their funding, because when needed and if there is no funding available, they'll be out of business, right? And so the appeal of programs like Blue Knight is these are companies that are developing technologies that could be relevant for oncology, but also relevant for preparedness, and so we are supporting those companies. Then as companies progresses, they oftentimes will need that acceleration support and some feasibility funding, which is what BARDA Accelerator Network will provide. You'll hear more about it. As they progress more, they will look for that early stage de-risking non-dilutive funding, and so we have something called EG, Broad Agency Announcement. This is R&D contract funding mechanism, non-dilutive money, where a company can get money to de-risk their technology. As they progress more, oftentimes they want to go and raise equity from venture investors. We have created a venture fund with a partner, Global Health Investment Corporation. So it's close to $500 million global health security focus fund that does equity investments in companies that are relevant to BARDA's mission space. So through that partnership, we have already done 14 investments and growing. And so again, another way to support a company that is different than the typical approach government supports companies, right? Typical government support is for a project. So we'll fund a company for a project to take it forward. Equity investment, you're funding the whole company. And so we can support a company in their commercial launch or to get their product forward. We also have several consortium through which we fund our partnerships. We have two partnerships called Rapid Response Partnership Vehicle and Biomedical. These are two consortium-based approaches where we work with our partner to get the money out quickly to companies. And then that late-stage advanced R&D funding, we use R&D contract vehicle called Broad Agency Announcement. These are companies that are close to clinic or getting to clinic that will take their product all the way to approval. And then we also launched a decentralized clinical trial network last year. So we already have 4 partners that we are partnering with. This initial phase, we are trying to help these partners do their capability build, so helping them get more sites that are decentralized in their nature. One of the partners is Walgreens, and they're going to add several capability in their network from the retail pharmacy approach to be able to do decentralized trials. So as you see, really, we are trying to develop programs that will help meet the entrepreneurs and innovators' needs across the spectrum from really early stages they take their idea forward. What we're really excited about, and Manbir will talk a little more about BARDA Accelerator Network and our partnership with Matter, with Paratus. What we're really excited about, and we had several meetings earlier today, and we're excited about the partnership that Matter has, right, with all of you, either health systems or the academic institutions that are here. We understand, and as Stephen pointed out, we learned during COVID, the value of having a robust infrastructure in place when there is a pandemic, right? yes, you need to develop technologies, you need to have drugs and vaccines and diagnostics, but they're only effective if you also have a robust ecosystem of ways to get and deliver these countermeasures to the public. And so being able to partner with you all in that endeavor is like what we are really thrilled with this partnership. And yeah, thank you all for coming. Again, hopefully I've educated you a little more on BARDA, so you can go and next time someone asks you, do you know of BARDA? You say yes, yes, and they are like cool. They do a lot of really exciting, innovative things. You should talk to your Congress staff and say, hey, give them more money. But no, really, it's been great to sort of set up this partnership. Really excited about the event today and looking forward to talking to you all during reception and later. But with that, I'll pass it to Manveer so he can tell you a little more about the Accelerator Network.
It's my turn to get even more excited about programs, especially with here. So first off, thank you all for joining. I guess I'll do a similar personal flair. So I actually grew up in Kalamazoo, so excited to be back in the Midwest or have a program that lets me come back to the Midwest more often. So going on to BARDA Accelerator Network, as both Stephen and Naseem mentioned, there were a lot of lessons learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, and having that scalable, agile system in place to really be able to support both companies at later stages through into market, but also at the very early stages. So we got to thinking after things settled down, we were in normal operations for how we can build a more sustainable program. So this is what we've come up with. So we want to support companies in all technology areas, meet them where they are and how they are, right? So we have this 5 hub-based network that supports companies that are directly aligned to BARDA's health security mission areas. So we have a medical device diagnostics hub, therapeutics vaccine, digital health, enabling technologies, as well as a special populations hub that focuses on pediatrics, because as we all know, that is unfortunately a very small market and secondary thought for a lot of those innovators. So really wanting to help support them through their development to market. And the way that we're doing that is really through a scope of 3 main areas of support. One is your traditional accelerator programming. Whether you're an academic that's thinking about spinning out of technology innovation, we want to be able to be there with you to help you with making your first pitch deck, figuring out how to even license your technology, where to incorporate your company, all the way through to your series investment rounds and supporting you through that process. And then additionally with that, we also realized that accelerator programs are great, but most people are there for the money. So how do we also get the money to them as well? So with that, we have this program that we internally call Development Evaluation Validation Services, which is our funding solicitations. So to date, BARDA has been able to support companies at the earliest stages for up to $750,000 of non-dilutive contracts with the EZBAA. But now we're actually building an earlier stage focus in to really get that early stage feasibility. So wanting to get companies to, or working with companies to really help them find that right data, whether it is technical or even looking for feasibility, validation studies for their innovation with real world evidence. And on the other hand, as we just talked about, we want commercial viability with those projects. So we're also interested in working with companies that may not be directly in our mission space right now, but they may have a use case that is aligned to us as their 3rd, 4th, even 5th go-to-market use case. And we can provide them with a little bit of seed funding to then be able to validate that technology for that use case and really help them along their technology development pipeline. And all in all, really wanting to build a rapid response capability. So having an infrastructure in place that allows us to really scale up operations in this early stage ecosystem across all the 5 hubs that work together as a network to then be able to react and respond quickly to that next emergency as it happens. So with that, I'll go a little deeper into what we're doing with Paratus and the Digital Health Hub here. But I won't say all the fun stuff because I want Gina to be the one who does that here. But here's our focus areas. In year 1, we kept it pretty broad in terms of really wanting to build out a strong pipeline for that foundational year of the program with these priority areas that are of interest to BARDA. So I won't read down the list. I think everybody can do that on their own. But I will mention, you may be thinking, oh, I might have an innovation or technology that may or may not fit these areas. As I mentioned, we want to talk to everybody. So please reach out to the Matter team and us, and we'll definitely be able to chat more and want to learn what you are all developing, what's out there, or what you're thinking of for those future guidelines that we can then use to bring into the innovation fold to really take these innovations forward. And with that, I will pass it back to Stephen for the next session.
Thank you. Thank you, Manbir. Thank you, Asim. Appreciate it. So now we're going to transition to a series of conversations. We're going to start with Dr. Omar Latif, who is the CEO of the Rush University System for Health and Rush University Medical Center. He got that job, or was appointed to that, elevated to that job in the middle of 2019. So he had 9 months-ish to get the lay of the land before the pandemic happened. And I would say he led a particularly innovative, effective response to the pandemic. So we're going to talk about that and get his thoughts on how we can be even better prepared the next time. So Omar, thank you for joining us. And as I mentioned, Rush took a particularly innovative and I guess I can say it, I say one of the most effective responses to the pandemic. So can you just describe what you did? And obviously you could spend hours doing that, but give us a lay of the land.
No, so first, thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me okay? Is that all right? It's impossible to look cool on these chairs. So every time Stephen asked me to do one of these things, I always think about the chairs. And I thought about tennis shoes, sneakers. I went with dress shoes today, didn't work.
Yeah, but the socks are good.
The socks are elevating the game.
Yeah.
I had my job about 6 months before the pandemic, and I grew up in the ICU. I'm sort of a blue-collar mentality, enjoyed taking care of patients, and loved working at Rush. And Rush has a mission, like every other health center in the country. Our mission is to improve the lives of the patients we serve. And it's also to decrease the death gap in the city of Chicago by half by 2030. And the death gap is about 15 years. If you live around Michigan Avenue, if you're born on Michigan Avenue where all the bougie stores are, you live about 15 years longer than if you're born around Rush University Medical Center. So we built this infrastructure to decrease that gap prior to the pandemic. And when the pandemic came, there was a 3 times higher mortality in this country and in every city in COVID. And people in the world were acting like this is some sort of new news, that it turns out if you're a certain color, you'll have a worse outcome. And we decided, we took a step back and said, this is our chance to make an impact. We've been living this, saying this is what we wanted to do. Now's our time. So we did what every other medical center would do. We got together with our whole staff, played We Will Rock You by Queen, beat the ground and clapped and said, this is what we're built for. And without knowing it, we had a tagline, and everybody in the organization believed this is what we were going to do. Around that time, the people that were dying from the pandemic were people in less fortunate areas. There were people that couldn't get ventilator access, or they couldn't get access to an ECMO circuit. And so we decided we think we're pretty good at ICU care, so we're going to become a giant ICU. So our plan was to flip the entire hospital and become an ICU. And then we were going to open our doors and take the sickest patients we can find. And a guy named David Ansel, our CMO, prior to me and sort of my mentor, would pick up the phone every morning and call the safety nets and say, who do you have that you think is going to code today? And then we would take those patients and we would fill them in. And we got close to 1,000 transfers pretty early on, I think, pretty early on in the first wave. But it was a very high mortality because we only took transfers that were literally really sick. We had capacity, I think, to do ECMO on 6 patients, and we were doing it on 12, 13 a night. And ECMO's like crack for an ICU doctor. Like, it just makes everybody live, right? You put them on it, and it buys you time. And so we were stretched thin. But the desire, the philosophy on what we were going to do came because of part of who we wanted to be, which was to decrease that death gap, to change the outcomes, and to affect the whole city, and to partner with people that were better than us to figure out how to do it well.
Well, you said a lot of interesting things. Did you actually bring people together to play Queen's We Will Rock You, or is that just a metaphor?
No, we did a lot of, I'm looking because my chief operating officer is here, and she was the operator, the genius behind a lot of our response. It was an emotional time, and there was a lot of team building that went on. So yes, we did that. We did a lot of other things. We did a lot of I think, creative things to get people to really accept or buy in. There was one night where we had about 6 transfers, and I think 2 or 3 of them died a couple hours after they got to Rush. And I thought, all right, I'll go take donuts, because that's what administrators do. We're universally hated, and we bring donuts in and think that that's going to help. And I don't know if you know what donuts are available around midnight. They're the plain and the coconut. Go to a Dunkin' Donuts at midnight, anywhere in America, and you'll see plain and coconut. No one knows why they make those donuts. And if you like those, I'd like to talk to you after this meeting. So, I picked up the donuts, take them to the ICU, and you're walking in, and if you think about the emotionalism at the time, these were people that were working all day. We didn't know anything about the disease. People were going home and changing their clothes in their garage, and then walking in their house naked and sleeping in their basement. Right? And then you're turning on TV and hearing about how this was going to be a boom for healthcare, right? And everybody's going to win somehow, and this is some great coup. And, there are all kinds of things you can do that we were missing, like drinking bleach and giving serum from different things. And this is the world and the environment we're in right now, right? And so if we didn't play songs, and if we didn't get our team together, and if we didn't have everybody come together, it would have been dramatically worse. But I think that our response, some of the things that were innovative that came out during the pandemic were some of the most wild things that you can think of. So we think of innovation. So I'm not very smart. Steve's very smart. I'm not very smart. So when you think about innovation, you think of like apps, technology, and all these tools. I would argue the most innovative the innovative discovery that came out during the entire pandemic came out of NYU. And it was a picture that one of the nurses had where she took really long IV tubing and just kept connecting it together, and then dragged it out of a room, and then put the pump on a chair outside the room. And she put it on TikTok. And we're sitting there looking at it, going, oh my God, every time the machine beeps, you don't have to put on all this equipment. You don't have to don and doff and put on all this PPE and go into the room and do it. And we started forwarding it around the city to our friends, going, hey guys, you don't have to do this. You have to put the machine outside, right? And just shut the door real gently so it doesn't cramp the IV tube. And that was innovation in the middle of a pandemic that came out of one center, one hospital, that probably dramatically changed the amount that we saved. So I don't think the innovative structure had to be designed as well as we all thought it had to be. I think where we failed a little bit was on communicating best practices, which is what I'm excited about groups like you.
Well, at some future date, I'd love to have a conversation about leadership and the role that Queen plays in great leadership and motivation and inspiration of teams in times of crisis. But what was the moment when you realized, well, this is a big deal. This is very far outside the bounds of normal that we've all been trained to deal with and manage, and playbooks that we have to do. And as you were in that moment and subsequently, what are the kinds of technologies other than an extra long IV tube or IV tubing, or a therapeutic or something that or a vaccine, I guess in the early days. Like what are the kinds of technologies you're like, gosh, I wish we had that?
So there was a lot in that question. So the moment we realized it was a big deal was just watching the carnage in the rest of the country and the rest of the world. I think that, the pandemic hit Chicago after it hit Milan, after it hit Seattle, and after it hit New York. And if you could watch what was happening in Italy, where Italy, ironically, had a gentleman named Dr. Gattinoni, who was like the pioneer of this technique called proning. About 30 years ago, he had figured out if you flipped someone upside down that it would improve your oxygen. And the only reason I tell you that story is it's ironic that one of the cities that was hit hardest by the pandemic had one of the therapies that was pioneered there just by happenstance, right? And so all our proning data came from that. But if you're watching Milan, you're watching carnage and you're seeing these people on national, international TV talk about what's happening. And then it hit Seattle, and then it got even more real. And then it hit New York, and then it was in front of you, right? And so we knew it was real before it came to Chicago. And it's an interesting story. We brought our team to a room and said, this is a big thing. And there wasn't a single patient in Illinois. And we decided, part of, I think, being a good leader is having the humility to call really smart people when you don't know what to do. So I called New York, and I called a lot of the leaders in New York and said, if you had a time machine and could go back in time, what would you do different? And they said, well, I would clear out the hospital, I would stop elective surgery, I would save all my equipment. And I would just be ready. And I said, okay, we'll do that. And so we did that. And I'm a new CEO, and you can tell right now I have no executive presence. I have no idea how to run shit, right? So I'm running this place, and I have this job, and I'm running this place, and it's empty. We emptied it out, and we stopped elective surgery. So that was about an $8 million a week burn, right? Like we stopped elective surgery, and there were no patients. So Monday comes, there's no patients. Tuesday comes, I think I probably wanted to call in Gazi and say it's coming, right? Like, but you don't want to cheer for it, right? But you're like, everyone's looking at you like you're a buffoon, right? And then we had the first patient came. I think we had a phone call from my friend. And then we got a second patient, a third patient, and then within a week, it had taken over. What we did was take a page book from giants who were very smart, who said, I wish I had done this, and we did all that. And we built a forward triage area, and everybody thought we were ahead of the game. All we did is another innovative move, called people that had it first, right? And so we did that, and that helped us be prepared. The second part of the question was what technologies really helped, and this was a great source of frustration for us at Rush, for us in the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, and the rest of the country. It turns out in healthcare, somebody figures something out early. Like somebody will figure out what's the right ventilator setting to put a patient on with ARDS. And a guy in Colorado figures it out one night at 2 in the morning. It's a great story. Publishes an article. 6 months later, we read the article. It goes through a lot of different variations. And then a year later, they do grand rounds. And 3 years later, we do it. Right, now we have a pandemic, and there's more and more modalities that are getting good outcomes. Some in Italy, some in Seattle. And here's what we do in healthcare. We fight over who did it. Who was the first person that came up with this idea? Wait, are they going to publish it first, or who's going to do? So the best part of the knowledge during the pandemic wasn't being shared. We couldn't even think about it. There wasn't even a way to communicate what was working and what wasn't working. When should you prone somebody? Should you use control mode ventilation? What level of fluid should you use? Because we were hoarding our data as even the wonderful people, the scientists, the geniuses that walk around, right? We're hoarding their information, trying to figure out how we can get this published quickly, right? I'm sitting here thinking, we have telephones, we get FaceTime, we have a million different modalities. So one of the things that we wanted to do was do a better job sharing data in real time. And the data explosion that happened during the pandemic was massive, and the pressure that came on healthcare institutions was far greater than our ability to deliver. So that we counted one day how many pieces of information we had to turn into different government agencies. So it turned out a staffed bed had a different definition in the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois, and then for the CDC. We set up a team that just collected data to make sure we didn't irritate any of the federal agencies that we had to get data for. But every single healthcare institution was doing it. So you said, what is the technology that we needed so badly? We needed to figure out how to do real-time sharing of data. We needed to figure out how to do real-time bed management that every one of us did in our residencies. So when you're a chief resident, and I promise I'll stop talking after this. You can throw me.
Please don't.
So I'm a chief resident, right? When you're a chief resident, you have a list of all the admissions that come in. So I was in New York City, I had to get the list. So you would make sure that every team had the same number. Not a difficult concept. 4 different admitting teams. I'd get, this team goes here, this goes here, this goes here. Well, it turns out everybody showed the overloaded hospitals all over the news in Michigan and all over the news in these different cities. But they didn't show the hospital 30 miles away that had some capacity. What we didn't do as a country was load balance. As a country, we did not load balance. What we did as a chief resident on a sheet of paper and a telephone, which would say the next patient goes up because we're so fragmented. So to working with the state and working with the city, we partnered to create a data hub. And the purpose of the data hub was just to say, where was the next open bed? Who could take the next sick patient? What was stunning to me is not everybody wanted to be in it. People didn't want to be in it because it's we have our own system. We have to take care of our system. We have our own hospitals here, where we have our own this, or we have our own that. We were really good at commercials saying we're in this together. We were really bad at being in it together, and where technology helped us a great deal. By the time we had a data hub stood up with the city of Chicago in the state, we had already passed the second surge because we had built all that infrastructure. We built it with the former chief technology officer, Anish Chopra, built it with us, and a lot of people came together to build this together. And all it did was show where the next open ICU bed was. So if you knew a person was coding, you could look at a big graphic and say, go here, go here, go here. Such simple technology isn't readily used in healthcare.
Is that still exist?
Yeah.
And is it still being used for different purposes?
I think one of the people that's managing it, Neil Soldani, is here. Yeah, it's still being used by the city of Chicago for different. It got used when we had, what was our last outbreak?
Monkeypox?
Measles. We used it for the measles outbreak. So we were able to. So we built the infrastructure. We were able to track where the measles outbreak was.
So, imagine you have to do it all over again. Now you've been through it, or it's not. Whatever happens next isn't going to be exactly the same thing. But what would you do differently?
Boy. So it's such a fascinating question, Steve. So I think at the end of the day, the biggest challenges that we had as a nation was the amount of fragmentation early on. And I think what we would do, I think what was phenomenal, I'm not saying this because we're in the state of Illinois, but the state of Illinois had what history will show is one of the best responses to the pandemic because we had the ability of learning what other people did, and we had arguably the most humble healthcare leader whose jacket's not the trendiest, but is Dr. Ezike, who's sitting down. Because what I can say is data has to mean something. And so we had cities that didn't have a 3 times higher mortality based on the color of your skin. We had a state that was able to immunize and able to vaccinate and able to figure out how to do it. Because I think we learned from watching the states and the cities affected ahead of us and took those lessons learned. But the biggest lesson learned is that we had resources and we had overload, and we didn't align the resources to the areas that we had overload. So for a hospital that was taking in transfers that wanted extra beds didn't necessarily go to that health system. So we needed to partner better. If I had to do it different from my perspective, it would have been to partner better with people outside of the healthcare infrastructure. Right? How do we partner better with the bed companies so that when we take 1,000 transfers, we can get beds? And how do we partner better with our local politicians to say it's probably not really cool to increase the price of a bed 250%? That's what happened during the pandemic. And I think we needed to do a better job of telling the story in real time, load balancing, and breaking down the fragmentation. At the end of the day, Illinois did well because we worked better together than other places, but we could work even better the next time we have a pandemic.
All right, last question for you. Recognizing that we are Paratus, a digital health accelerator, what are the kinds of solutions that you think entrepreneurs and innovators should be working on so that we collectively are in a better position, whether it's next year or 50 years from now, to be able to manage these kind of large-scale public health emergencies?
I think we have to do, this is such a powerful question, and I have so many opinions based on failed experiences in partnering in the digital world. And you could look across the country at healthcare, and if you're from the digital technology world, just think, this is useless. Why would I go work with one of these healthcare institutions? All right. You guys are a terrible audience. You're supposed to say, no, Omar, it's great working with you. Here's the problem. Healthcare is like taking a cruise ship down a river. You can't turn it. We're not agile. We don't understand when you come in and say, let's just do this. And if you don't believe me, you can travel from here to Singapore, never talk to a person, change flights 4 times, go to 3 different lounges and figure out how to get your visa, never talk to a person. Try to get a derm appointment tomorrow at any hospital in Chicago. You'll talk to 5 people, give your birthday 3 times, pre-register, and when you go, still fill out the paperwork. For real, you'll go and they'll say, give me a copy of your card or you can fax it to us. My kids don't even know what the hell a fax machine is, right? So if the question is how do we leverage digital technology, we have to figure out how to partner with public-private partnerships that are developing digital technology in a way that's aligned with the problems that we're trying to solve. So right now, digital therapeutics can dramatically impact outcomes. Apps using gamification can convince people to take their blood pressure medicine by giving them points, right? Far greater than any blood pressure medicine that comes out. And if you go to a health center and try to sell it, they'll look at you and be like, I don't have a budget for that. What are you talking about? Like, we're not aligned. We're not built to embrace innovation in healthcare today. At least Rush isn't. But we want to be. We have the right offices, but taking the idea into operations, we have to partner better with all of you in the innovative world.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. I want to welcome up someone you've just heard about from Dr. Latif. So Dr. Ngozi Ezike. She is the president and CEO of Sinai Chicago, which is the largest safety net hospital in the city. But before that, and you took over that role in 2022, and before that, you were running the Illinois Department of Public Health, and I think you were in the job a little bit longer than Omar was before.
3 extra months.
3 extra months before the pandemic hit, so you had 3 extra months to kind of get your legs under you. Really what I want to talk to you about is the state government perspective, but obviously informed by the fact that you're now running a health system. But my impression has been that the state of Illinois, I mean, even before what Omar was saying, really did have a particularly effective response, and you were kind of at the helm of that. So, but taking a step back and putting yourself back in is probably painful, but putting yourself back in that situation, and so understanding that nobody was particularly well prepared for this scale and this kind of an event that happened. What were the areas where you felt like the state was actually least prepared to navigate this emergency that was unfolding right in front of you?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And first, I'm going to respond to that crack on my jacket because I am wearing a cardinal red because today my daughter signed with Stanford to play basketball. And so I was going to come in my Stanford gear, but I said, okay, I'll just wear the cardinal red color. So, okay. But now this is...
During the pandemic, she challenged me to a basketball game, and then I said yes, but she's scared to play.
Oh, right. I don't remember it quite that way. Anyway, Omar is my very best friend. Like, there's no better leader in healthcare. His heart is in the right place. You don't always see that. I had a bird's eye view of that from the state, and so it's a pleasure to partner with him. I hate going after him because he's so dynamic, and so it's kind of like, could you put me first? But here we go.
Next time.
So just talking about how are we prepared? Let's start from the beginning. The very first thing was kind of figuring out, how is it transmitted? How will it spread? And then figuring out that, yes, masks will help, and just not having enough supplies. Ironically, just maybe 3 or 4 months before this really hit, we had done one of these, mass emergency drills, a preparedness drill. I think it was for the entire state. It was put on by IDPH to prepare for a pandemic-like situation involving the flu. And so, we had all these tabletop exercises across the state, planning for, how we will test people, how we will roll out vaccines. So it was kind of like we kind of had a dry run before this, but the amount of PPE that was needed when we said that, universal masking could be helpful, we didn't have it. Like, there were stockpiles, and so then you went into the stockpiles and you're like, oh, no. Because how it works is that the state health department is supposed to provide supplies to the local health departments. Fun fact, how many local health departments do we have? 97. Okay, you cheated. Okay. 97 different health departments across the state of Illinois. And so IDPH is supposed to supply all of those health departments so they can supply fire stations, EMS, police departments, and they all came to their local departments looking for those supplies. And then all the local health departments came to IDPH looking for those supplies, and we were looking for the supplies too. Like, oh, sorry, like there is not enough. And so trying to source that when everybody was trying to source that. There was literally a situation where, everybody was calling contacts and, oh, I heard I have a guy that blah, 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 blah. And so there was a plane that was carrying a bunch of supplies that we had ordered and that came into Chicago, and the feds met us and took it over, like literally. Like that's how dog-eat-dog it was to just get PPE and supplies. So that's a clear like hole where we didn't have enough of the PPE and didn't have, storage, enough stock. We didn't have the nimbleness at that time to quickly, which I think we do now. Like a lot would be different if it happened now, because I know that we could take the examples and turn over a factory and quickly start churning out stuff that maybe we didn't have in a way that we weren't ready to do that. But that was a big piece. And Omar spoke a lot to this because there was such an interconnectedness between what the public health department had to do with the actual hospitals is, just the interconnectedness. We had like the disease surveillance. There's a disease surveillance, app that was already in place. INETS. It's the Illinois Electronic Disease Surveillance System. Yeah, and it involves people at the local health departments, often getting stuff from the local hospitals. And it's almost a very manual process where people are putting stuff in. Like, we think we have a case, and this is required for any kinds of reportable diseases, which this obviously became one quickly. And so we have something that is suspicious, and we want to put that data in, and that's when you're getting the demographic data. Who's the person? What are the circumstances? What are the symptoms? And everything is supposed to be put into so that we can get it in our state system, and then we can forward it to the CDC. And so it became a problem where the local health departments didn't have enough people. Like some of the local health departments had like 5 people total that worked for that local health department. And so even the bigger ones, even the city of Chicago, like the number of suspicious cases, suspected cases, all the terms that we were using, there were not enough people to put all this information in. So people were like, I can't get it in. Like, we don't have it in. So being able to automate that kind of stuff, I'm jumping ahead to what you'll ask, like in terms of what are some solutions? Being able to automate and have these processes be more seamless and have information transfer directly out of doctors' offices and hospitals, like that's the way that you will be able to have all the information aggregated in the same place, get to the places that it needs to be, and then have, AI and all the fancy analytics jump in, as opposed to the very manual process where I was hiring epidemiologists across the state to look at all the data, collate the data, and make sense of the data, when I think, we're almost 5 years later. I think it would be much easier using a lot of the technology that we have now with AI and the ability to kind of just assemble all this data and have it analyzed for us. So it would not look the same at all, God forbid, if there was another pandemic again in our lifetime. We have made quite a bit of progress on the technology side that would benefit a would-be pandemic.
I mean, your story about I got a guy and a PPE and the plane landing, it's like bringing me back. I forget, I wasn't in the middle of it like you were, but I just forget the insanity of that, and how it just speaks to how, as a system, we were just really not prepared to, which is understandable, but
Yeah.
Hopefully we can be better next time. Talk about, as you've lived through this, what were some aha moments as you kind of, maybe even after you got through the initial insanity, but oh, okay, we got this because we can do the,
I think we kind of, maybe not destroyed, but we altered the narrative that government is just too big and too much bureaucracy and can't get stuff done. We got shit done. We really did. We were able to, actually, we were the first public health lab in the country to devise our own test. That was the main thing, that we were like, oh, you should get tested. Oh, you should get tested. Oh, wait, we don't have any tests. And okay, so if you just have this symptom and that symptom, just call it COVID. If it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, let's call it a duck. But then because we would, the few supplies we had, by the time you sent the swab, you sent it to the CDC, and then you waited for the result. I mean, the turnaround time was like weeks. It was like a week, 2 weeks, and then by the time our scientists right here in Illinois, in our public health lab, devised a test that we could use. We had it approved. We were the first public health lab to do it, and we were turning over the results in a couple days. 2 days, then it was like a day by the time you got it reported out. So there was a lot of nimbleness, is it nimbility? Whatever, nimbleness that we were able to show that is not typical, or it's not really what's thought of when we think about state government. So really, really proud of that. Really proud of the amazing partnerships. Everybody talks about, oh, everything's so siloed, like you have to go here and then you have to go tell the people the same information. But us being able to launch full-scale, statewide, mass testing sites, mass vaccination sites, coupling with the Illinois National Guard, so I had one of the members on my team who was an ex-Marine who was over the National Guard and, running point on being able to say this is, he would go to whatever location in any part of Illinois, scope out the locations that would be perfect for a mass vaccination site, bring the leaders from the Illinois National Guard. These operations were smooth. They were smooth. The local health departments would be like, wow, thank you, state, for helping us. So a lot of synergy and collaboration and partnership was super successful. Amazing people that work in government that were able to just rise and shine and show their scientific talents, their epi chops. A lot to be super excited and we rock,
Well, we rock. I was going to ask you, you haven't mentioned the type of music that you were playing in your leadership meetings.
I don't think we had music playing, but I'll remember that for the next time. I'll remember that.
So, you had a view across the whole state, and you've touched on some of this already with the data, just the jankiness of data sharing that Omar was also speaking about. What would you have liked from a state perspective? Mm-hmm. Are there technologies that you would have really liked to see, looking in retrospect? God, it'd be so great if we had, that could really help.
Yeah, definitely some of the technologies to streamline the transfer of information from health organizations, clinics, hospitals, to the local health department. That was a problem. I mean, the more data you have, the better you can kind of get a handle of, what are the trends. And so missing, not being able to get that in a timely fashion, that was a problem. I think in terms of ongoing surveillance, there are definitely more solutions that probably need to come through the pike, where we started some of it where, it's affectionately called poop water testing, where you are testing sewage water on a regular basis to look for levels of COVID. There's fecal shedding of the COVID virus, for example. And so being able to just constantly be sampling sewage water allows you to just see what are the normal levels of, pick a virus, pick whatever you're looking for in this sample for this locale, understanding that you have to know what feeds into this pile of sewage sewage water that you're collecting, and then saying like, oh, okay, stable levels of influenza, stable levels of this, stable levels of this. Ooh, this looks like a significant spike over the last, couple of weeks. And so being able to build out that kind of technology will allow us to not respond, when, the house is on fire, but be able to detect it when it's still smoldering, when it's still smoke.
Yeah, early warning system, so
Yeah.
you can get the machinery up and running.
That's right. That's right.
So now you're running a hospital. You're running a safety net system, largest one in the state. So think about it from your perspective now. So something like a pandemic, some other large-scale emergency, it's creating some of the same chaotic vectors that you experienced during the pandemic. What are the kinds of technologies you think, and the same question I asked to Omar, what are the kinds of technologies you think, it could be data sharing, it could be different ways. There was a big push during the pandemic to not go to the hospital.
Right.
And so, she
Yeah.
could be missing pieces there.
If you had a situation where the goal is to, avoid, usually in medicine, it's all about touch and being able to lay hands and heal through healing hands. But if there's a situation where that's absolutely not what's wanted, where you're trying to separate and distance, then the technologies that are obviously necessary are those that allow you to still examine and diagnose and be able to figure out what's going on with the patient without reaching out and touching, and so if you're just dreaming up stuff, and again, anything that you dream up, it can be real in a few years, right? It's not that far off, but just trying to think about how you can do more remote, physical exam piece. And so, of course you want the virtual, the virtual exam where, you can zoom in through the patient's, TV at home, and here comes nurse or doctor so-and-so, and they're assessing, and then you have this little thingamabob, and you can just open your mouth and put it on, and it projects the inside of your mouth, and you can see oh, do I see signs of it's strep versus this, or do I see petechiae on the roof of, your mouth? Some kind of device that can help you simulate parts of the physical exam where, the visualization can be such that someone somewhere else could then use that for diagnostic purposes. I was thinking of that. I mean, obviously things like just all the different remote patient monitoring that is out there, not, again, wearing the equity hat, there's so much technology that's out there. It's just not available to everyone, and you can always know the groups that are not going to have access to it, and that's what promotes disparities instead of bringing them together. And so whenever technology is available, there has to be such intentional thought about how is this going to get to the least of these, if you will, to make sure that we don't worsen. But, I've been to a talk recently where they talked about how they could use drones to drop people's medicine right at their front door. So let's say you're suspicious that they have X, Y, or Z, and you drone them the little thingamabob, so that they can, help put something on, and their heartbeat, if you're worried about some arrhythmia, that they can, their heartbeat can be heard, through this device that's transmitted to their doctor, that they could have something that could, you're worried about an earache, and you want to be able, you can visualize, the tympanic membrane from where you are because you inserted this little thing that helps visualize it and sends the image. So I think there's a lot of, I don't know that these things exist, but I don't think it would be that hard for them to come into existence.
I'm going to start a company called Thingamabob. I love it. Well, thank you very much. Thanks so much. Congratulations to your daughter. Really appreciate you being here, and looking forward to, well, hopefully not looking forward to working with you in the next pandemic, but looking forward to working with you on other things. So thank you very
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.
All right. So next up for our last of these little conversations is Dr. Donna Edelson. Dr. Edelson has been studying all-cause decompensation for at least 20 years. That's probably more than that. But she's an internationally recognized expert in cardiac arrest, sepsis, and rapid response systems. And she created a clinical decision support platform called eCart that tells hospitals when patients are going to deteriorate, which patients are going to deteriorate so that they can intervene. And importantly for this conversation, and the reason she's sitting here in addition to being an incredible physician and researcher and entrepreneur, is because she has worked with BARDA in the past. And so wanted to get an entrepreneur's perspective on this conversation. So, well, first of all, Donna, your company's called Agile MD. What does it do?
So Agile, can everyone hear me? So Agile is a clinical decision support company. Our goal is to get evidence-based care and bring it to make it universally acceptable. And we do that by working inside the electronic health record where the providers are. So that's who we're targeting. And we have two key things that we do, both of which end up being very relevant to preparedness. We have a pathways tool that I almost think of it as like, I don't remember Microsoft Visio, you create pathways. So the idea is that you can create pathways, clinical pathways, and they render inside the electronic health record with orders and everything that you would need right there. And the beauty of it is that the providers and who have the clinical knowledge can actually do most of it themselves. And so it really shortens the cycle to actually deploy this stuff and have it up and running. And then on the other side, we had eCart, which is an AI predictive analytic that is basically sorting the whole hospital from highest risk to lowest risk based on how likely they are to go to the ICU or die in the next 24 hours. And so all of that ends up being sort of relevant around when we get to thinking about preparedness, and sort of comes up, especially if you think about actually hearing everybody talk about COVID, that it was really useful in COVID. Now, none of that technology was built for COVID. It all was built, the company was started before this, had nothing to do with COVID, but the second COVID happened, it was very clear that both of those two tools were really useful. So you talk about in those early days, picture March of 2020, and as we saw Dr. Lateef talk about, like, we had no idea what to do. And things were changing constantly. And every time we would learn something new, we would change it, and the protocols were changing. And so what most hospitals were doing during that time is they were printing them on PDFs and sending out those new pathways in email. And they were changing constantly. Like, literally your inbox would be full and they would change, and you're like, is this the most recent one? Is it, because you never even knew if you had the most recent one. Well, the health systems that we were working with, they were just deploying them right inside the EHR. So the newest one was always right there, and all you did was click on the COVID pathway and you followed what you needed to do, and the orders were built in. And they were deploying them within hours, as opposed to, back in the day where you would have to sell a kidney and, promise your firstborn to get an order set built. I don't know what the turnaround is, and for the doctors out there, how long you wait to get an order set, but 9 months is not unusual to get something built and deployed in the EHR. So we were talking about hours. And then at the same time, eCart was really useful because the acuity was so high. We were drowning. We had not seen acuity quite that high, and we had to ration ICU beds. And so it was really helpful to have a tool that could show you all the patients sorted from highest risk to lowest risk and help us assign ICU beds and surgery to ORs, to the whole thing. It was so for in both of those ways, we found it particularly useful. But I was just gonna say, there's a lot about COVID here, but I just want to say it wasn't all COVID. If I can just give you another preparedness example from 2 months ago. Hurricane Helene hits in September, wipes out the Baxter IV plant, puts us all in a nationwide shortage of IV fluid. Who's prepared for that? Who's thinking we're not going to have IV fluid? I wasn't. Never occurred to me. But so UNC, who's one of our customers, who was also profoundly hit by this same hurricane, within 6 hours, literally 6 hours, start to go, they had deployed a pathway inside their electronic health record to encourage more use of oral hydration for anyone who could tolerate hydration, and so made it so that you couldn't order IV fluids unless you had gone through this clinical pathway and diverted anyone who could get oral hydration to get the oral hydration. Again, 6 hours. Didn't plan for this.
Such a good example. I'm also glad that you brought up something other than COVID, because just thinking about COVID for all this is like my blood pressure's going back up to where it is. But it's anyway. I just talk a little bit. I want you to sort of brag a little bit. I think, like, how did your company come to be? And then on the eCart side, you just gave a spectacular example of how on the pathways side, you solve a problem quickly, something that otherwise systems are really struggling with. On the eCart side, you've told some stories. I said we hear about companies all the time, like, oh, it's an AI solution and it does this and it prevents that and whatever. And they, like, honestly, a lot of them start to sound the same. And so I want you to, like, how did the company start? But also, like, one of the stories that you've told me in the past that is like, wow, this actually really works. Was about when a hospital in the western suburbs put it in labor and delivery and saved somebody's life. And so maybe just tell a story like that so people understand what it is we're talking about.
Sure. So the company starts, I still am a researcher and physician at the University of Chicago, and I had been working, actually initially was working in cardiac arrest in the hospital, doing a lot of really cool stuff with technology and in cardiac arrest, and it became really clear to me that we had a lot of people arresting, which was great for my ends, and it made my research in cardiac arrest really cool because I had so many patients I could do really cool things with. But so many of those patients shouldn't have been arresting in the first place, and it was really clear that there were signals of early warning signals in their vital signs in their labs. And this was all around the same time that we were switching over to electronic health records. And so we started working on a predictive analytic, which now at this point has gone through multiple iterations. When I started, we weren't doing gradient boosted machine learning models. Everything we were doing work in predictive analytics was just logistic regression, and now these tools have gotten so we can do such cool things now in AI. So continuously the model just kept getting bigger, better and better, and but it was always focused on trying to do the same thing, which was find patients who were deteriorating before the clinicians were seeing it, because if you look at any one given thing. So we all can walk in, and any doctor can walk in a room and see when a patient is hypotensive that they're in trouble. It does not, my interns can do it on day one, my third-year medical student can do it, right? What's trickier is when a bunch of things are just a little bit off. They're a little bit tachycardic, they're breathing a little bit fast. It's a constellation of a bunch of things, and that's where humans aren't nearly as good as machines are. And so that was the question: is how do I work on this, and so I can do the stuff that machines do better than humans, so that I can save the humans time, so we can get the humans to do the stuff they do really well, which is get in the room and actually take care of the patient. None of these predictive analytics are going to save a single person's life. I got to get the people to the bedside, but that is really hard because we are drowning. None of us went into healthcare because we wanted to watch patients die. We're all in it because we wanted to do something better, but we are drowning in all the inefficiency and in the acuity of our patients, and so we need to be able to risk stratify our patients. And so that's why I started working on, and the model is gotten continuously better and better. And I will say that initially it was, I thought that if I just built a model, that would be it. I would just build a model, I would put it out there, and it would work. And, well, no, it doesn't work like that. You're all laughing because you knew that, but I didn't know that. So then I was like, oh, you build a model, but now you have to get them to see the model. Okay, well, so hold on, let me work inside the EHR, let me figure out how to put it in a really obvious place in the EHR, and so then they'll see it, and then they'll do what they're supposed to do. No. Okay, fine. Let me build pathways. Let me get them so then they see the thing, and now they see the pathway, and then they go to the pathway, and then they'll do the pathway, and then they'll do it. Okay, closer. But it turns out, okay, now I need dashboarding and reporting, and I have to get on phones with people, and I have to get them, I have to show them the data, and then they have to see that they're not performing as well as another unit is performing, because I got to use kudos and shame and all that stuff, because I got to change culture. And so then we get there. Now we're doing it. But every single time I walk into a new hospital, we'll get a new customer, and we'll turn on a new hospital, and we'll go live and go to them. Every single one, the story that I told you probably 10 years ago, probably from one of the first hospitals I turned on, I see it in every hospital. So I think the one that Stephen remembers was a postpartum patient who we had turned to ECODR literally that morning in the hospital. And postpartum, many of us have been on a postpartum unit. We call it's sort of near a hospital, not quite in a hospital, right? Because they're not really checking vitals. You're fine. Like, you're young, healthy women who are delivering babies. They're going to be fine. No one's that worried about them until something bad happens. So ECART went up. Sorry, so ECART turned red on one of the patients on the unit, and which then triggered. So my rapid response team was looking at the list, and so they go to see this patient, and they get to the bedside, and the ECART's red, and they put a pulse ox on the patient, and the pulse ox isn't picking up. I'm like, well, that's strange. Okay, so they put her on oxygen, and they draw blood gas, and the blood gas comes back, and she's profoundly hypoxic. And it turned out she had flash pulmonary edema. They got her, but I mean, she had very low oxygen, so low that it was not picking up on a pulse ox. Got her to the ICU, got her diuresed with Lasix, got her a new valve, and she went home a week later with her baby, totally fine. That is the kind of scenario, though, that 3 more hours of sitting there on the unit turns out a lot different for both her and her baby. But I will say I've seen that. That one stands out because it was a young, healthy woman, but we do that all the time. And it's not because the clinicians on the floor are dumb or they don't care. They're not. It's because they're doing other things. And they're doing what humans do really well, which is interact with people and walk in the rooms, but they're missing the subtleties.
So you've collaborated with BARDA.
Yes.
Tell us about that experience. You can pretend they're not in the room if that's helpful. But what did they support, and why did you work with BARDA, and how was that collaboration?
Well, first of all, I would say the same thing about BARDA, whether they were in the room or not in the room, which is they were incredible partners. Back when COVID first rolled out, so March, I think it was early 2020, because all I know is I think I got up from my chair. I think I just wrote grants for a full 6 months. But BARDA had put out an easy BAA RFA for a $750,000 award in COVID. I had just barely heard of BARDA before because they had also been interested in sepsis. So initially we had thought about putting in a similar grant for sepsis, and then decided to go for COVID. And so we did that, and the application was so easy. Somebody who writes a lot of NIH grants, it was a relief. It was just so simple. You could bust it out in half a day. You could get that submission done, and put it out. Now it wasn't quite as quick. I think it was a revision, and it took some time. And so it was probably at least a year or so after when it actually got funded. But different from NIH, for example, where I think the pain is in getting the grant. You write the grant, and it's super painful, but then you get the grant and they leave you alone. These guys, they make it super easy to apply, but then they actually want to be involved. I was like, what? This serious? No, you gave me the money. Go. But so they want to be on calls with you every month, and I was I do not want to chaperone. I just want to do this work. I'm really excited about it. But it turned out they actually were so helpful because they have experts from just a lot of people come from different places. So they brought people from who had been at FDA before to help us. So mostly what we ended up using the money for was to get through FDA. And so we got we did a pre-submission, then we did the submission and the multiple rounds of revisions with FDA. And every single time we were on a call with FDA, these guys were right there. Every time we sent anything to them, they wanted to see it before and made actual substantive comments. Great. I mean, really, just so helpful and so grateful at the end. And then the money we used to do to help support the costs of our attorneys who helped us do it, and also the prospective validation, which so they helped fund the turning it on and running it live and in several sites.
All right, last question. What's your advice for entrepreneurs who are working either directly in this sort of medical countermeasures space or who are building technologies with potentially dual applications? So more, pedestrian day-to-day applications, but also could be used in the event of an emergency?
I think that for us, being threat agnostic, it was really helpful. And so, as I think, so COVID, by the time we actually had our FDA clearance, nobody cared about COVID anymore. The whole thing took that long, but we had a tool that worked for all clinical deterioration, which meant it worked really well in COVID, it worked really well in sepsis, it worked really well in pneumonia, it works really well in heart failure, it works really well in COPD. Literally anyone who's going to need to go to the ICU or die, it works on, because that's the population that we trained it on, and so that's to the extent you can do that, because these things come and go faster than we can predict. Next. So to the extent you can think about being threat agnostic, I think that there's real value in that. Number two, I think the other thing that was helpful for us and that I would also recommend is test, whatever you're doing, test it on a very large population so that you're certain it's generalizable. And so for us, that meant that we trained our model in about over 900,000 encounters from 7 hospitals that were all in the Chicago area. But when we went to go validate it, we validated it in almost 2 million encounters from 21 hospitals that were geographically distinct, and over a long time period that was both pre and post-pandemic. Same with the training set. And that's, I think, part of why then the model holds up really well when you move in and out of whatever the threats are.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your insights, and looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
All right, my colleague now, who leads our collaboration with BARDA, Gina Konstantakopoulos, is going to share more about what we're doing and what we're planning with Paratus.
Good afternoon. Great to be here. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today about the Paratus Digital Health Accelerator. We're actually in process right now for recruiting our first cohort. So cohort 1 applications are now open. As Manbir mentioned, I'm just going to touch briefly. We're really doing a couple different things as part of this program. So the first thing is accelerators. The first one is open right now, and we'll close this upcoming Friday, November 22nd, and we'll open a second one in March. Additionally, we'll be doing these funded studies. These are going to be opening up in January, and there'll be more details available on our website. You can go there right now and fill out an interest form, but really they're intended to help startups evaluate, develop, and identify kind of key elements to really pressure test and de-risk your solution. And last is we're offering ad hoc services to additional companies that are already in the BARDA sphere. So again, I'm not going to belabor each point on here, but I do want to call out a couple of things. We heard during the session here that there are a few things to think about. We're interested in solutions that are coming from sometimes other industries that can be applied towards these digital medical countermeasures. So think about things like, hospital at home that we heard about and how relevant that could be. Think about things like remote clinical study trial design, and think about those health equity lenses that we heard about. So we're looking at solutions that can maybe help level the playing field for that next kind of public health emergency. Please, look through the list. And what I would also encourage for those people in the room and with us online is think creatively about your solution and think about how your solution could be used in a use case that maybe you haven't thought about yet. A little more detail about who should apply. We want entrepreneurs and university-backed solutions that have some established proof of concept or some evidence in place. The program itself is fully virtual, so geography is not a limitation. If you're international and you're interested in applying, I really encourage you to do so. And last but not least, really, we're expecting you to participate about 5 hours a week between January and March. As I mentioned, the applications are now open and will go through next Friday, November 22nd. We'll be announcing the first cohort in December, and then the program runs January through March. Final showcase kind of mid to late March. Please use this QR code to visit the Paratus website, where you can also fill out an interest form and get additional details. We really encourage you to apply. So with that, I would like to say thank you. Stephen, do you want to come up and close this out, or you want me to close this out? Me to close. All right. We really appreciate everyone, both here in the room with us and those joining us online. Thank you for your interest and your attention. We're really excited about this new collaboration and partnership. So join us in the next room for the reception. Thank you.